The subject of the event is research funding in Europe for neuroscience post-COVID-19. Obviously, many people are interested in research funding for neuroscience, and the new normal presents unique challenges and possibly even opportunities for how we can develop neuroscience research within Europe. We have four very interesting speakers for you today, two of whom are active research neuroscientists who are also engaged in advocacy activities for neuroscience. The other two are professionals working within science funding structures within Europe. And so we'll hear both sides of the advocacy policy relationship in a sense. And then we'll have some discussion at the end of the session. The session itself is 1 hour in length. Each speaker will speak for a maximum of 10 minutes. And then we will have a question and answer session, which I will chair. In the interest of time, I will not give the speakers extensive introductions, but our first speaker is Monica De Luca, who is professor at the University of Milan in Italy, and also the president of the European Brain Council, which is the umbrella organization for brain research and brain health organizations in the European Union. Monica is also a past president of FENS itself, where she was president between 2014 and 2016. So please, Monica, when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Please share my screen so we can start this very important topic to discuss. And good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to Thomas Ryan, who was able to put together this very important topic to discuss, because as in my opinion, this is extremely timely, and we need to discuss now on how to shape in a better way, in the best way, our brain research advocacy strategy for the future. I would be glad to discuss immediately how we decided to organize our advocacy strategy in this particular period within the EBC. So let me start to use really a couple of minutes to tell you what EBC is, because maybe some of the audience will not know what it is all about. And basically, as Thomas already alluded, EBC is an umbrella organization. Sorry, slides are bizarre. It's an umbrella organization that merged at the same table all the scientific and clinical society in Europe that has an interest in the brain, merging together in a very important manner with patients' organization, representative for the member state, and representative of the private sector. And of course, the general idea that we had already 20 years ago by generating this important board was based really on the conviction, on the strong conviction that to raise awareness on brain research is absolutely essential. And the engagement of the scientific community at all levels, at large, is a prerequisite for advances in brain research to be translated into application, and for the society to benefit from the breakthrough discoveries that constantly came out from our discipline. So the idea was, of course, to speak as one voice to the major institution to raise awareness in our discipline. And of course, we have a core mission that is basically to promote brain research and brain health in order to improve the prevention, the diagnosis, the therapy, and the care of people living with brain disorders in Europe. And we will discuss this in a moment. And we had some main action areas. That is, of course, to promote brain research, but also to foster in the cooperation between all members' organizations. So basically improving the dialogue between the scientists, the clinicians, the patients, the society, and the private sector, to raise awareness and promoting the education of the brain, that is extremely important, disseminating information about brain research and brain diseases in Europe, and of course, interacting at a very high level with policymakers, with the European Commission, with the European Parliament, and other relevant international institutions. In doing this, we have been using in the last 20 years many different tools, and I can name a number of documents that have been produced by European Brain Council. Maybe one I have to name because it's possibly the most popular, which is the Cost of Brain Diseases in Europe, that was published and revised already in 2014. So now we are looking for updating this number. But already in this shape, the numbers are incredible, because in that document, that was a comprehensive multiple analysis in 27 member states, and we analyzed 19 brain diseases, we have been able to show that the cost of brain diseases has been estimated to almost 800 billion euros. This is an incredible number already, but if we look into the number of the European citizens that will experience a brain disorders in their life, this amount at 179 million. This is 1 out of 3. I really believe that these numbers really showcase the immensity of the problem that we are facing, that we need to face, and therefore highlight in the best way the need that we have for continuous supports of fundamental brain research to fully understand the brain. I have to say that very recently WHO echoed on these numbers, and basically in 2017, they claimed that mental and neurological disorders are responsible for the biggest numbers of year lost to disability at European level. And this is again an incredible number, 62 million dailies, so year lost to disability. So, but we all know that the impact of brain disorders is huge. We are really discussing about the ticking bombs in our hands in front of us, but we also know that the impact of brain disorders extend well beyond the healthcare system, so it has a strong impact on the society, high cost for technological progress, loss of healthy life years, as we already said, the pressure on health and social welfare system, implication for labor markets and prolonged impairment, great dependency, significant reduced productivity in our society. So this represents really a challenge, and we need to focus on this challenge because we all know, we are scientists, that tackling societal challenge and making breakthrough discovery is really not a linear process. And therefore, what is really needed is a continuous support for science and innovation in this domain. And in particular, this is true for brain research even more because the challenges that are presented by the complexity of the organ of the brain and its diseases requires a long-term vision and a higher level of integration and support for the full breadth of neuroscience research. So we really need, and we ask for continuity of investment in brain research to engage the society to realize the challenge that we have in front of us or the threat that we have in front of us. And I'm really firmly convinced that without convincing basic research and appropriate support, there will be no innovation in this field. So it's really particularly challenging. And as I alluded to you at the beginning, it's particularly appropriate to me, and I'm grateful for Tom for organizing this, to discuss now, because we know that the European Commission, and we will listen to Karim Burko afterwards, is finalizing, let's say, the 9th European Framework Program. That is the flagship program that will fund research in Europe in the next 7 years. Has the aim of funding research and innovation, of course, also in the health space, including brain research, and that's some characteristic that certainly Karim will show us. And I have to say that EBC, with all the member society, and particularly the scientists and the patients all together, decided to act and to advocate for brain disease, for brain research to be included and encapsulated in the best way in the frame of this new European working program since already 1 year. We decided to have a multiple strategy, so to act in multiple ways. We have been able to address the very start phases, including some broad lines that were highlighting the importance of the brain in the first draft of the working program. This is particularly important because having this broad line basically represent the possibility to have clear calls for our discipline in the program itself. We work together with other organizations, European organizations, to reinforce and ring-fence the health cluster budget, because as I alluded to you before, the brain research will mostly, if not all, but let's say mostly, impact on the health cluster budget. We ask for a prioritization of brain research in Horizon Europe's strategic plan and work program, and we are continuously debating about this. And also, we are particularly interested in launching a robust brain health partnership that will be a new instrument for this program to align the research strategic agenda of the member state together with the European strategic agenda. So we're really looking for merge efforts to go for brain health and to support our discipline. And in doing so, we are using certainly many different tools again, but one I really would like to mention, because we have been very fortunate to be able to coordinate, to have funded in Horizon 2020, a very important program that is called the European Brain Research Agenda, or EBRA, and I really invite everybody to have a look on the EBRA website. This is a very interesting project that is coordinated by EBC, and we are merging together as partners all the large initiatives that are really funding brain research in Europe, including the Human Brain Project, the JPND, the ERANET Neuron. So we are really working all together to streamline and better coordinate brain research across Europe and across the major large funding initiative. And we decided to address altogether some key issues because we really wanted to see a goal and to go for, let's say, breakthrough discovery, but also a benefit for our society. So the key issue that we wanted to address in EBRA are basically to avoid fragmentation or replication in this multiple large initiative, to create better connections, but also identifying gaps, because maybe there are some domain of our scientific discipline that is not fully funded or appropriately funded, but also identify some shared priorities. And of course, we decided all together to coordinate, focusing at different level, a more strategic level and operational level. The real strategic level and the very ambitious goal that we will hope to share with all the scientific community in the next year, in 2021, will be to develop a shared European brain research agenda. This is extremely important, and we really seek also for alignment at global level. And we discussed a few days ago about the importance also of global collaboration for this ambitious goal. But also we work at a more, let's say, operational level, because we facilitate the emergence of research projects in specific area, providing them support for effective collaboration, sharing data, access to infrastructure, and promote in general the open science culture. And of course, in general, we increase the visibility of brain research in this way portfolio as a whole, and we want to promote the uptake of EBRA results to key stakeholders. And we really hope that the results of this particular project will be extremely visible to the European Commission afterwards, also in the development of the work program from 2021 and 2027. But let me finish in a couple of minutes saying that we are facing a very important moment in our life. And this is not only because we are generating the new framework program, but because we are living in what has been described as the post-COVID era. And certainly COVID-19 and this particular emergency and pandemic situation clearly posed a clear threat on those living with other pre-existing conditions, including brain conditions, so posed the whole society in a threat mode, but also gave us strong evidence that we need more competence overall in public health and need for more coordination to face emergency and big numbers. So it was a tremendous moment for all of us, and of course also for our research, for the society in general. But I think that we really need to learn some lesson. And the first lesson that came out from this situation to me, it's a very important one that was realized by the whole level of society, really, from policymaker society as a whole, is that research is essential. So it clearly has shown to all society that research funding is crucial for the society itself. So I think that we need to keep this momentum. And on a daily basis, we need to be very vocal on the fact that non-infectious diseases remain equally as misunderstood as a virus like COVID and have an emergency and an urgency on their own. And if we look at the number of brain diseases that I showed you before, it is very clear that this is an impressive number. And these numbers, brain disease burden of the society, remains a constant emergency. So we can hear and realize the lessons learned from COVID are that as a society, we are not yet fully prepared, not capable to tackle the majority of these large epidemics we are currently facing, or we potentially face in the coming future. And this includes, in my opinion, brain research. And I have to say that the longer it takes for our society to understand that brain diseases are a constant emergency and a ticking bomb, the more difficult it will become to adequately react to this challenge and to intensify research. It will be very difficult to say at this moment and to discuss how all this can impact the research funding in our discipline. I have to say that unfortunately at the member state, in some cases, in small countries, some funds has been distracted and go to infectious diseases because they needed to face the emergency, which is absolutely fair. But would this be prolonged? This would be really a short sight. We also know that research on different domains stalled and were severely impacted. Of course, the European Commission had to postpone the deadlines. Containing measure hindered research and an effort to collaborate in different countries, we all know. And also research initiative that rely on the health system was also strongly impacted. But I think that what we need to do as a community in our discipline, as scientific community, is take this as a strong opportunity. So the transition from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe is, in my eyes, a window of opportunity for the brain community to show to the European society and the European community that health research is crucial for the society based on the experience of the COVID-19, and that funding should remain uninterrupted, that adequate resources should continue to be dedicated to addressing the burdens of brain disorders placed on our society. This is so clear. And I want to repeat, and I will close with that under the so-called normal circumstances, brain diseases remain in a state of emergency that can be solved only intensifying research to reach a complete understanding of brain functioning. And with this, I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Monica. Our second speaker is Camilla Bologne, who is a group leader and associate professor in neuroscience at the University of Geneva in Switzerland. Camilla is also an alumnus of the Fens Kavli network and is an early career neuroscientist, so brings this perspective to things. But she's also a member of the advocacy committee for the Society for Neuroscience, for the American Society for Neuroscience in the USA. So Camilla, please.
So thank you, Thomas. Can you see my screen? Yeah. So thank you, Thomas, for organizing this session. And actually, compared to what Monica just told you, I would like to share my personal adventure in the advocacy. Actually, yesterday morning, I was running late as usual, dropping my 3 kids at school. And while I was juggling between pacifier, teddy bears, and the notes for my meetings, I met a new parent that suddenly asked me, "What do you do in your life?" I freeze, I turn, and I say, "I'm Camilla Bologne. I'm professor of neuroscience at the University of Geneva, And in the last 6 years, I've been dedicated my research to understand what drives individuals like us to interact. All societies are indeed founded upon social interaction, and we just experienced during the COVID crisis how much social distance may impact our lives. Using mice as animal model, we precisely investigate how the brain controls social behavior and how alteration in specific brain region may lead to social deficit related to mental disorder. I'm happy to discuss further with you some specific aspect of my job another time. I turned and I left. So at that moment, I realized how grateful I was by the fact that I had my elevator pitch ready and I could share my expertise and my credential quickly and effectively with someone who don't know me. And actually, how did it happen, right? So how this happened that I had this pitch ready. So this is the consequence of the fact that last year I became part of the Government and Public Affairs Committee, GPA, from the American Society for Neuroscience. And actually, the mission of this committee is really to guide and evaluate SFN advocacy activities and develop strategy that may promote neuroscience research. So they have a US-based advocacy program that are really helping the scientists to become involved in federal science issue. But then they have also global advocacy program where they work with international research community, as Monica said, to increase really support in neuroscience. And actually, at the beginning, I was surprised they asked me to be part of this committee because I was saying I'm not a citizen of the US, I'm working in Europe. Why they want a European to be part or of their committee? And this is exactly for this international research community and the importance of having global advocacy programs. So then I start to realize, okay, what should we do, right? So which are the real program? How, as a scientist, can we act? And there I really realized that basically what we should do constantly is raise awareness and global support that is necessary for investment in basic research and in neuroscience discovery. And to whom we should advocate to the public, to the policymaker, to the funding agency, to the politician, but also to other neuroscientists themselves. So one of the programs that they have implemented at the SFN is this famous Capitol Hill Day. And basically I was last year involved in one of these programs. So this is the primary advocacy event of the year for SFN, where SFN members go really to Washington physically to meet with congressional representatives. And this is really with the idea of educate them on the advances of the field, to share the economic and public health benefit of investment in biomedical research, and make really the case for a strong national investment in scientific research, is where really you can redirect the funding of the years. So basically, when scientists go there, they meet face-to-face with lawmakers, policymakers, and their staff, and they have really to create a personal connection while sharing their expertise. So unfortunately, because of the COVID situation this year, I was not able to attend the meeting that I was looking for. But somehow I was really involved in the preparation of the event. So for me, it was a very interesting experience because despite the fact I was some other time involved in this, what I call advocacy, this was the first probably time that I was consciously work to prepare a big event like that. So what I learned, and this is, I have to say that in this program, you have really the support of many people at SFN that help you to prepare the best this day. And moreover, the SFN website is also rich of a series of videos and tutorials that they advise you to follow, really to be prepared to advocate the best as possible. So I really learned the importance. I mean, it seems trivial because, we are all scientists. We are used to speak with people. But when we speak with policymakers, with the public, is a completely different setting. So the preparation of the event is the very important part where you need really to understand that you should share your personal story. You have to personalize the story, and you have to be really concise in the time and create a compelling story. So they give us tips, and this is, what is that? The personal elevator pitch you have to do in this 60 to 90 seconds, where in all of that you have to condense who you are, the district where you live or work, a very basic summary of your research, really presented in lay term. You never know who you have in front of you. And then the potential impact of your research and why federal funding would be so important. So actually, I told you, you never know who you have in front of you, but during the preparation, they tell you in advance who you will meet. So you have basically also to go and see who you are speaking with and adapt your speech to the person, right? Really to this congressman or the staff. So what I learned is that, when you explain who you are, you have, of course, avoid the acronyms. You should not think that everyone knows what postdoc or fellow means. So you have really to use very plain term and very simple term. And then the most important is how you should highlight your research, right? So you have to focus on the problem you are investigating, and then you have to write down all the points, but then narrow them down to the most important. And you have to focus on one project, but on the same time, you have to consider the bigger picture. So it's extremely complicated. And I don't think my elevator's pitch is the best one. I should work still on that, but it's really, you have to adapt every time for that. So then you also have to make it relevant. And what I also learned is that there are some questions that are recurrent, and you have to prepare the question to answer in a short time. They tell you to maximum has to be 50 words. So they're really precise in the directive that they give you. So normally the question is that what is the potential impact? Why is what we are studying interesting and important for non-neuroscientists? And how may your research eventually affect or improve some aspect of people? And then you have to really create your take-home message. So what you would like your audience, the person you are speaking with, remember about your conversation. You want to have one word that identify you and your research, and this person has to remember why this is important. So during execution, then is also very important to really practice your execution. And then, there are very simple stuff that we all know as a scientist, but be concise and really avoid conflict, but build relationship with the person you have in front. And one important aspect I also learned during this COVID situation is looking at the television debate between journalists and the scientists, that how much is important to be able to say, I don't know. So if we don't know something, we have to admit that we don't know. And I think this is extremely important. And then the other important aspect is always to follow up with the people you are to speak with, right? You have to maintain the relationship with the people, and you have really to keep in the contact. And what they organize at SFN is also they organize lab tour. So for people that are interested in policymaker, lawmaker, congressman, staff, they really organize and they invite the people in their lab to show their research and really to advocate for the importance of a funding dedicated to the research. So for me, this was quite a unique experience, and I really looking forward to participate to Capitol Hill next year. But what I really realized is that how much is important to prepare your elevator pitch and to be able to outreach and advocate for raise awareness in our daily life. We don't need this event. We can do it every day with our kids, with our parents, with our friends. And you never know, you are in a bar, someone asks what you do. You have to be ready, because maybe this person is a donor, is a policymaker, and you can make a difference. So I think that everyone can make a difference. So this is what my experience I want to share with you. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Camilla. Our third speaker is Karim Burko, who is working at the Director General at the DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission, where Karim is Deputy Head of the Combating Diseases Unit and also leads the neuroscience group there. So Karim, when you're ready, please.
Yeah, can you see it? Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for providing the European Commission the opportunity to explain a little bit where we are in our thinking for brain research and what the COVID crisis has brought and changed in our thinking. So I will briefly speak about where we are now, what we've been doing in the last 6-7 years, excuse me, and then move to the future activities, and finally what the COVID crisis has brought. I will not insist on the burden of disease, as Monica has mentioned quite clearly where we stand, but I would just mention that on top of the normal situation, the COVID has brought also an increased burden of mental health disorder that we will probably discover more and more in the next month to come. So what has the European Commission done in brain research under what we call the Horizon 2020 programs, which ran from 2014 to 2020? We have funded something like 3 billion. We have funded 3 billion euros on brain research in general, which will be more than what was done in FP7 because it's still not finished, and we are still basically counting back the funding that we have funded. You can see on the pie there that most of the research went to collaborative research, which is let's say the landmark of European research funding, where groups from at least 3 countries in Europe and beyond work together. But increasingly, the share of the funding on brain research comes from the Frontier Research, which is the European Research Council, and from the Marie Curie program, which is put as a mobility and training program. 13% also come from the partnership with the industry, and more so to the SME program. So how do we, let's say, tackle brain research at the EU level? Usually the key leitmotif, if you want, is partnerships. The European Commission partners with the member states, and that's what you see on the top right, through the joint programming on neurodegenerative disease and also in neuroscience with the neuron. We partner with the member states also under the Human Brain Project, let's say the ICT infrastructure for developing brain research. We also partner with the industries through the Innovative Medicine Initiative, and they have been quite, let's say, involved in brain research. They have set up a platform on Alzheimer in particular. And what we've seen with the IMI is that industry is coming back a little bit into the brain research area, because from the early 2000s, they were withdrawing from this field because basically it was too complex and not mature for finding innovative drugs. So and step by step through the IMI, since they are sharing the risk, they are coming back to brain research. And then we partner with other funders in the world, like the NIH in the US, the CIHR, Canadian, Australian, but also with China, India. And we do that through the Global Alliance for Chronic Disease, which is focusing on implementation research, and I will come back to that. And also on the traumatic brain injury, with large cohorts being put together. And on top of that, we have launched the European Brain Research Area that Monica just mentioned. And I would not go too much into it because she talked about it. But really what we want is, we would like the European Brain Council to develop a shared research agenda between all the large initiatives, to be complementary, and also to see where are the weaknesses in European research, what are the strengths, so that we can tailor a little bit more the funding that we will do in the future, and it's led, and the key players are there. So the mapping, as I say, identifying and developing a shared agenda, not only in Europe, but also how we can link to the main large initiatives in the world. That's the second part of what we expect from this collaboration with the European Brain Project. And basically, all this thinking will feed our strategy for brain research, with the funding starting, the big funding for the Brain Health Partnership will start in 2025, because all these initiatives have currently covered financially until then. And now I'll move to Horizon Europe, which is the next EU research and innovation framework, 21 to 27. That's how it's originally planned. And you will see that it's very similar to what we had in Horizon 2020, with 3 pillars. One, which is more what we call the excellence, the bottom-up type of research. The second one, which is more oriented to global challenges and societal challenges, and that's where the health cluster sits. And another one, which is more about innovation. As you know, that Europe has a very good and very strong tradition on research, but in terms of translating this research into innovation and application in real life, we struggle a bit more. So there will be a big emphasis on that area. And what I want to say is that brain research is everywhere in all these 3 pillars. Of course, the main area is health, but you will see that in pillar 1, I think about 20%, 15 to 20% of this budget goes to brain research also. So please do consider also the other areas. What is new in Horizon Europe? The 2 key novelties are the creation of the European Innovation Council. As I say, research is strong, but the translation is not as strong due to fragmentation between countries, due to innovative ecosystem that are not that fit for purpose. So we're trying to improve that. And also we're trying what we call the mission approach. Basically, by providing a goal, we hope that many partners will work together towards a common goal, and that's somehow what the EBCs will try to do with this EBRA, trying to bring all the actors together to go through towards a common goal. International cooperation will be strengthened, in particular regarding the association. We're hoping that some countries, in particular industrialized country, will be associated directly to Horizon Europe, which means that if they are associated, they will count as almost as a European. They don't have to justify why they are the partner, and they will be eligible for funding. We'll stress again open science, as Monica say. We have seen also under the COVID the importance of sharing data, but not only sharing, but sharing them as soon as possible, and that's the aim that we'll try to achieve under Horizon Europe. And in terms of partnerships, we've been criticized in the past that we are funding too many partnerships, different, and we are trying to rationalize their numbers in order to make them more impactful. What's the current stage? We are basically preparing the first 4 years of Horizon Europe. We will release a document very soon on where this strategic plan is going. We're doing a new way of developing the project, which is more co-design with various stakeholders, but outside the Commission, but also within the Commission. For instance, the health cluster is not managed by DG Research only, but also we are encoded with DG Santé. So we're trying to to make sure that whatever research is developed is after taken up in the health system. And as I mentioned, impact oriented. Impact oriented doesn't mean necessarily only the mission and only the mission. It also means how we can use implementation research to actually impact the society very, very fast. There are many solutions that we know that are successful, but in many countries or regions, they are not implemented. And that's where we're trying to focus on. Why do we do international cooperation? Basically, here is just a graph to show that the more international partners you have in the research, the more cited is your work. So it shows that the quality increases with international partners. In Horizon 2020, we have seen that the success rate of the applications is higher when you have international partners. It jumps from 15% to 20%, which is quite significant when you have more than 2 applicants from outside Europe. And also once you have made your consortium, you are more productive with more articles published with third partners associated to the project. As I mentioned, the approach is to have a new association, and we are working with the countries like Canada, Australia, and other countries to be actually part of Horizon Europe, exactly in the or very similar as Turkey or Israel is currently. And we all obviously want to tackle global challenges, and we know that in health they are all global challenges. And we have more opportunities also to collaborate foundations which represent big partners in health research. Multilateral initiatives, we have started that, and we want to continue that part. Basically, most of the funding agencies are really very, let's say, difficult to work with. So we just say, okay, each one will fund its own research, but then the researchers will work together. Okay, I will finish with Horizon Europe and the recovery package. Open science, as I say, research infrastructures. We are hoping to create the European health data space with all data from many countries going to a single point. Research infrastructures will therefore be important, as well as comorbidities. We have seen that the body, in the body, everything is linked, and we hope to strengthen cohort. Artificial intelligence will also be key, in particular in addressing areas that we are not very good at, like understanding and prevention, and aging will be part of it. And I just wanted to say something on the recovery package. We have the normal funding for the MFF, and then we have the recovery package of 750 billions. And part of that, there is a big chunk that will go to the health program. It goes from 400 million to almost 10 billion. And then an extra 10 billion will be allocated to Horizon Europe. And part of it, hopefully a big chunk of this will go to brain research. And I will stop it here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Karim. Our final speaker is Mark Ferguson, who is speaking in his capacity as chair of the advisory board to the European Innovation Council, which Karim introduced as part of his talk. And he's also the Director General of Science Foundation Ireland, which is Ireland's main funding agency. And he's also Chief Scientific Advisor to the Irish government. I will be acting as the slide manager for this talk. So let me just share my screen. And Mark, if you can just tell me when you want to advance in your slides, and we'll go through. So whenever you're ready.
I'll do that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction. What I'd like to do very briefly is to introduce you to the European Innovation Council, which, as you heard in the last talk, is an innovation for Horizon Europe. Next slide, please. So the European Innovation Council is really a one-stop shop for breakthrough and disruptive innovators. Think about it as the counterpart to the European Research Council. The European Research Council has been fantastic for fostering basic breakthrough frontiers research, and the European Innovation Council aims to do the same thing for innovation. So it's open to all innovators at any time in any field. It's agile, two real forms of funding: Pathfinder grants for advanced research and enabling technologies, and the accelerator funding, which has the novel feature of being able to take equity in startup companies. So up to 2.5 million in a grant and up to 15 million in equity. And the purpose of this is to crowd in private investment. So the big gap between Europe and the United States is really in scaling and funding companies. It's not in the science and it's not in startups, but it's really in growing those companies. So we really want to partner, we really want to crowd in the private investment from companies, from venture capitals and so on. And then it's also about building ecosystems, having access to mentoring and advisory services, expert program managers. That's very much like DARPA, the United States program, where there are key experts who will actively manage the program. And then finally, prizes. Next slide, please. So the idea is that essentially this is really to focus on innovation. Next slide. So we're in pilot mode. European Innovation Council will be fully fledged in Horizon Europe, but since 2018, there's a pilot. This shows you the amount of funding. The projected budget for Horizon Europe is 10 billion euros, which over 7 years is roughly about 1.5 billion. And you can see that this year we're pretty much at that 1.4 billion. So it's pilot at scale. Next slide, please. So the first pilot was launched in 2018, a budget of 780 million, open support. And this slide shows you some of the results, about 6,000 applications, a lot of different fields, digital, energy, health, and so on. We interviewed 520 applications, awarded 250 awards, and the budget about 450 million. The advisory board, which I'm very privileged to chair, has set the objective that the time from application to money in the bank account will be 3 months. And so you can see 4 months was achieved in 2018. Next slide, please. So the second phase launched in 2019, increased budget, as you can see, to 1 billion. The advisory board, which I chair, the pilot accelerator, and the recruitment of the program managers. Again, you can see here about 3,500 applications. Interestingly, 60 to 70% looking for the blended finance. So they're looking for the equity plus grant. That's really interesting. And you can see the performance of various countries: France, Spain, Germany, Switzerland, Israel, and so on. And then the seals of excellence, which I'll speak about in a moment on the next slide, please. So next slide. This is the innovation. That's fine. That's great. So the final pilot phase was 2020, increased budget of 1.5 billion. The advisory board have published their vision and their roadmap. We've launched a Green Deal accelerator. So that's really to look at technologies addressing anything to do with climate change, food security, food supply, renewable energy. A pilot for women innovators. Women are underrepresented in the innovation space. And we've said we'd like to see at least 25% of the applications at the final interview stage being headed up by a female. The current number is lower than that. It's about half that, about 13%. We're looking at pilots with European EIT kicks, program managers, and the EIC fund established. Next slide. So a few words about these different programs. First, the Pathfinder. So the Pathfinder is about grants. It's about high technology grants. The last deadline was in June of this year, over 900 proposals submitted. And they look at cutting edge, high risk, high impact, interdisciplinary research. So these are areas that could lead to real disruptive breakthrough innovations. So the proposals have to have a clear and radical vision for a new technology that challenges current paradigms, that's in a novel and ambitious science to technology breakthrough, and that is interdisciplinary. Brain would be in there. Health is about 50% of the proposals in general, but also things like energy, Green Deal, and so on. Next slide, please. If you look at the Pathfinder and Accelerator calls to date, about 10,000 applications requesting about 28 billion, about 191 startups already funded, worth about 774 billion, of which blended finance is there. And then the seals of excellence, about 2,000 of those. Next slide, please. So what did we do for COVID-19? This gives you a really interesting perspective on the agility of the European Innovation Council. We had a call open, and within 3 days, we pivoted that call to say we will take applications from companies that are addressing COVID-19, in addition to the bottom-up applications that we would normally receive. As a result of that, we got close to 4,000 applications, of which over 1,000 were COVID related. The European Commission responded with equal agility, and within about a month allocated an additional budget of 150 million. So we originally had 164 million for that call, and we got an additional 150 million. That's important because it meant that the COVID applications did not displace the other applications which are around economic recovery. Results on the 8th of June, as you can see, the timelines are very short, 166 million to 36 companies for COVID, and 148 million to 36 companies for the recovery plan. And the COVID Seal of Excellence is for those applications, or the Seal of Excellence, which have met the quality threshold, but for which we have insufficient budget. So when you get that Seal of Excellence, you get two things. First of all, you get facilitated access to the structural funds. So in Horizon Europe, if you have a Seal of Excellence, you will automatically be able to use structural funds to invest in those projects. That's important, particularly for certain regions of Europe. And it also overcomes any state aid issues. And the second thing you get is access to all of the business accelerator services. So in addition to what we funded, 139 COVID companies got the Seal of Excellence and 679 for addressing recovery. And then we've done a few novel things. So there was a hackathon, EU versus virus hackathon in April. That was a very large hackathon. And there were 117 prizes for various innovative solutions that came out of that hackathon. But a hackathon only gives you ideas. We followed that up with what we called a matchathon, which was held about a month later in May, where we linked all of those 117 winners with healthcare procurers from across Europe and other countries, with potential investors, with companies and so on, 1,500 meetings. As a result of that, over 2,000 new partnerships, 120 new projects. So they were people actually procuring the solutions that had been advocated in the hackathon. And that's really important. It shows that we're trying to do end-to-end ideation in terms of the ideas, and then actually getting the investment and getting the procurement for those ideas. So next slide, please. So under Horizon Europe, the EIC will be legally established. There are a few things that we currently can't do. The proposed budget is 10 billion. It is bottom up, meaning it's about deep tech. So we are not funding hairdressers or butchers or things like that. This is real deep tech innovation. But we will also be able to do targeted funding for strategic technologies. If we wanted to say rechargeable, renewable batteries or whatever, we could do that. Dedicated governance, a bit like the European Research Council, the creation of this one-stop shop that I've sort of talked to you about, simpler, faster access to the EIC accelerator. So we've already streamlined the application processes. All of the shortlisted people get an interview, just like you do for the ERC. We're going to take that further. For example, we may well experiment that your first application could be a 3-minute YouTube video, which you send us, and that might be slightly different from writing a very long and cumbersome application process. And we clearly want that to look much more like what you would write for a venture capitalist rather than for a European Commission event. Transition activities, which is really to bridge between the ERC, with whom we have a very good relationship, and ourselves, to bridge with emissions if there's something that's translatable through to innovation. Much more flexible funding in terms of being able to stop or reorient processes, to give the program manager a portfolio that they can actively manage, like DARPA, some fast track access for ERC and so on, and a big partnership with member states. Next slide, please. So last slide is, has this done anything? So I quite like numbers. And if you look at the pilot, then the companies that we have supported in the pilot, 17 of them have gone on to initial public offering. 37 of them have been acquired, raising 4.2 billion. 25% is in the Green Deal in terms of funding, and 43 of those companies are now valued at over 100 million, so they're so-called centaurs. The objective is actually to get them, some of them valued to be over $1 billion, so really to grow unicorns within Europe. So we need to do better than this, but it's not bad for a pilot. So next slide. I think that's my final slide in terms of focusing. Thanks very much. I hope I've given you a bit of an overview of what this new European Innovation Council is about and will be about going forward in Horizon Europe. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We do have time for questions from participants, which I will field from the chat area. So we have a number of questions from the audience, and the audience are still, during this question and answer period, still able to ask questions as we go. The first question for Karim, where is neuroscience in Horizon Europe strategic plan broadly?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The neuroscience, the specific funding to neuroscience will mainly come after 25 with the partnership, the brain partnership that we are preparing with the EBC. Before that, there will be many calls open to neuroscience, but there might be one or two focusing on mental health, but it will be more for non-communicable diseases in general. And the most strategic part will come after 25, and of course, until then, you also have all the GPND, the neurons that are still providing calls for researchers on top of the health cluster.
Okay. So one question for, I think this applies to Camilla and to Monica, is that particularly I think in Europe that we as neuroscientists don't use our full capacity or anywhere near it in terms of science advocacy and advocating for the importance of brain science, which is why the European Brain Council is so important. But at the same time, when you go to neuroscience meetings, you find that there are a lot of neuroscientists, and I think this is true of all biologists, who are willing and able to participate in either advocacy or science communication activities, but they don't quite have a handle on how to take first steps or how to speak to policymakers, how to go about it in the first instance. And what I find remarkable is that some of the most effective people at engaging with policymakers do it with a very small proportion of their relative time. So it can be quite time consuming. And I just wonder, what is your advice for neuroscientists, whether they're students or professors watching this, who would like to be more involved in contributing to the kind of efforts of the European Brain Council and the Society for Neuroscience, but don't quite know how to go about doing that?
Maybe I start. I think that you touch a very important point. If we all use a very small fraction of proportion of our time to advocate for what we are doing in a proper manner, I think that the concept of awareness for brain research and the importance of it will be solved, basically. I think that what I do advise, particularly to young colleagues, is that first of all, we need to learn, and Camilla gave us a very important example. In FENS in the past, we did some media workshop in which we basically taught scientists by journalists on how to advocate, on how to speak. to lay public. This is very important. We should raise this again, but use the capillary network of our societies. I mean, FENS is an exceptional network in every country. So we need, first of all, to learn how to campaign and advocate in our country, in the member states, and then to convey back the messages to Europe. I think that the relationship between the local and the European level is extremely important, because if we really need to be effective, we need to convey the message first at our member state, influence the strategic agenda at the member state, and then merge our effort into the European level. And for this, we need to be able to use the network that is presented by our societies, our neuroscience societies. There is an exceptional network of very efficient societies at the local level.
Just if I can add on that, I mean, this is where the SFN, for example, organize a lot of this program for, in particular, young people that want to start to advocate. So they have, for example, these advocacy training seminars that they organize constantly, that where people go and really train people to be an advocate, or they have this early career policy ambassador program. So they develop a lot of this program to really train people that want to start.
There are fantastic examples on that also, for example, from patients' organization. EFNA is organizing some event in which we as scientists are teaching the patients, young patients, so that they can become an advocate. And they are exceptionally good. And I always participate to that because it's a great experience.
So we have a Brexit question. I think it's still relevant. So given the UK's participation in Horizon Europe is still uncertain, what would you advise for UK neuroscientists that are wanting to maintain close links with European neuroscience? Obviously, this is a very pertinent issue for many members of FENS, as the United Kingdom is a leading country for neuroscience research, not just in Europe, but in the world. I'm going to direct that question mainly to Mark and Karim to see what they...
You want to start?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I will say that under Horizon 2020, we have seen an increase of UK participation, at least in the health cluster. So they were quite active until the end, let's say. And those collaboration will continue for the next few years. So they are still there for the time being. It's more for a few years later that we can start worrying. Of course, the UK has traditionally been strong in e-research, in particular in the health domain. What I can say is that we do hope that there will be an agreement under Horizon Europe, and at least at the beginning, Boris Johnson was mentioning Horizon Europe as an area where he would like to participate. So that was the initial thinking. Let's see how things move. And secondly is that we always have the possibility of participating as a third country, as Canada did in the past. So in the worst case, there is still this possibility to participate as a third country. The main difference would be that they will be able to coordinate, but maybe the funding will not be automatic. So for sure, the funding would not be automatic. They would have to show their essentialness to participate to the project. So participation will still be possible, but without funding as a basis. But that's in the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I can just add, I mean, I would agree with that. I would hope that all efforts will end up in a good result for everyone. It's good for Europe if the UK are participants, and it's also good for the UK. So this is a win-win. It's not a win-lose situation. And in the unhappy event that that does not happen, I think member states are really going to have to step up with more bilateral and multilateral programs to try and engage with those UK researchers. And that's certainly what we're doing in Ireland. And by the way, that's also a win-win situation, because if the UK are members of the program, then I would say that will help Irish and UK researchers to win in the European programs. And if they're not, then we actually need them. So I think this is an action both for member states and for the Commission. But let's hope it ends up in a good place.
Okay. We have one question directly for Mark Ferguson, which is, what does the neuroscience community need to do to access funding through the European Innovation Council? I think many European researchers in neuroscience are going to be very attracted to the streamlined structure and seeming efficacy of the European Innovation Council. But I suppose a lot of us would be thinking, is this just for people who are on the cutting edge of method and technology development, or who are at novel clinical sides of things? Or is this something that you can envisage fundamental researchers having unconventional ways of becoming involved in also?
Okay, very good. So I think two things. First of all, if you're interested in very fundamental bottom-up research, that's really for the European Research Council. It's not for the European Innovation Council. But what we're interested in is innovation, and that can come from deep technological advancements in any field. It can come from the application of knowledge. It can come from solving problems. It can come from lots of different directions. So it's really about innovation. And at the end of the day, it's about translating that innovation into commercial potential. And so if you look at the portfolio, of more than half the companies are healthcare companies, and there are neuroscience companies in there. There are people delivering, for example, mental health programs digitally. There are people looking at neural stimulation, electrical stimulation of the brain. There are people looking at novel therapies for diseases. I mean, the whole panoply of what you would see. I would say that we are there to take a higher risk. I'm very careful about what I say, not a stupid risk, a higher risk. And a higher risk means that we would invest earlier than most of the private sector, because we think there's a lot of potential, but perhaps the technology isn't yet proved, or the team isn't quite there, or all the rest of it. And most real breakthrough technologies, they don't go through conventional stuff. I remember all of the booksellers saying that Amazon would never sell books remotely because everybody wanted to browse in the bookshop. That's not true. So a lot of that kind of disruptive thing. So it's really about innovation. Where can you create something, or where is there potential? And we're really, really interested in, next generation stuff. And personally, I think there's a lot of stuff in the brain. There's a lot of stuff in the green agenda, but there's so much we don't understand in the brain, that the potential for new therapies, whether they be cognitive or pharmacological or electrical, a potential for new understanding and for new businesses is huge. So you're very welcome.
Fully agree.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. Before we close, I'd like to put one last question to the panel, which is on the subject of open science. So open science is something that is of huge concern, particularly to the Franz Kavli network. And one thing that we've seen in the pandemic is how important open science has been. If we did not have bioRxiv and medRxiv, things would be possibly very different as we have moved through the COVID-19 pandemic. And it really raises very large questions as to the role of conventional academic publishing in how we're essentially paying a lot of money, because the turnover that academic publishers make relative to regular publishers is huge. And where many people might say that we're essentially paying for the privilege to delay the dissemination of our research. Which obviously is not in the interests of science, or indeed of funding agencies, whether at a European or national level. So given the situation we're now in, I'm curious to hear the whole panel's perspective on this particular challenge.
So I can start. Basically, Science Foundation Ireland is a signatory to Plan S, which is a very transformative plan. With a large number of funders that basically say we're not going to support research, and we're not going to pay for that research unless it's open and immediately open. That had a big impact. And I think COVID-19 was the kind of final impetus on that, where it showed the importance of this openness. And you can now see the response. You know, Nature have signed up to Plan S, so the whole Nature Publishing archive. You may have seen yesterday, Plan S Coalition issued a press release where actually the funders, and we are going to do this, are now going to require that the author takes a Creative Commons license to their own work that actually does that, which gives you the legal right to put your document into an open archive. The United States already do that. If you're employed by the United States government, they do that. So actually we can force this openness. And I think there's now a very, very changed view on the part of the publishing community. I think people are now much more at one that this is the way to do it, and that the business models have to change, and they will be about open science, and probably you'll be paying for more curation of the knowledge or integration of it and so on. So I think this is moving in a very positive direction. The next place to go, of course, is more into open data as opposed to the publication. And that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, the infrastructure required for that is huge, and the methodology is huge, but it's probably the way people are going. So I remain very optimistic that actually open science, and the funders, a large number of them, are now quite adamant, you know, if you don't going to comply with Plan S, we ain't going to fund you.
I would like to say something as a university professor, not only as a EBC or, you know, European scientist. I'm very optimistic as well. All the research-intensive university have supported very much the Plan S, the LERO League, and my university is part of it, and we have been extremely vocal on that. What we need to insist is on how to judge our young colleague. So we need to educate, you know, our colleague that once we are called to judge our young colleague, we need to be an open-minded and to change our perspective and the KPI. So this is for me the next step, and it is very serious.
If I may add, Mark mentioned the Plan S, so I will not go there, but I think if we want to go to open data, we need also a system to reward the people who generated the data. And I think that's where the focus a little bit should be, and because it takes a lot of time to develop, to generate data, and it's very difficult for young researchers to make their career. And maybe a reward based like as the D index, the data index, like you have the H index. If your data is used, then you're rewarded. Maybe we should go towards something like that.
I just want to say something that I think is important, because I'm, of course, a pro open access. I think all of us is. But what it has shown, in particular during the COVID, is that how important it is to educate journalists and media to read the papers on open access. And I think this is probably the only risk that will go through, that everyone will have access to anything, and people need to know how to read all the papers. And this, I think, is extremely important point.
So with that, I think we're going to close this session. I'd like to thank all the participants for preparing such polished presentations and giving us their time. I'm sure this will be valuable. In the long term, we're going to publish this online at the conclusion of FENS Forum. And I would like to thank FENS Forum for allowing us to produce this event on behalf of the FENS Kavli Network and also the European Brain Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.